Tonight I'm really pleased to be here to talk about my new book, Understanding Gender at Work. It's a new type of career playbook for women of every age, stage, and career level. It offers a wide range of career strategies based on using, losing, exposing, and disrupting gender blind spots, including gender bias. I wrote it to help women advance and succeed as we all wait for society to change and for gender parity to be achieved. So to tell you about the book, I thought it would be very helpful to go through these 4 questions. Why me? Why so slow to gender parity? Why this book? And who's the audience? And you may be surprised, because the audience is going to be far broader than I think you anticipate. So why me? As mentioned, I'm both a psychologist and a lawyer, and they are 2 different worlds. So I started out as a neuropsychologist, and in psychology it's much more balanced, in my view. The traits that are favored are those mostly associated with women. So when I got into law and I worked in the commercial real estate area, it was interesting for me to see how masculine the world was. And the traits that were favored were masculine traits. So it was quite a juxtaposition. So it got me curious. I really got interested in gender dynamics, and I started teaching women's advancement in 2003 when I left law, the practice of law. And I was just amazed at the valuable insights from my clients. As I showed them this material, we discussed this material. So why so slow? The next question. I went to university. I started out in 1972, and that was a heady time for women. We were told that we could be whatever we wanted to be and we could do whatever we wanted to do. And we thought, you know, the pipeline with so many women getting into law, that was the mid-'80s when I got my law degree, we really thought that we were going to shatter the glass ceiling easily with hard work, and because there were so many of us in there. And now we are here, 2017, and it looks like things are stalling. We know that in terms of the World Economic Forum. While I was writing the book, the prediction for the date to achieve gender parity went from 2133 to 2186. It's actually now further away. And I was listening to an expert at Rotman the other week, and apparently everything stalled in the 80s and 90s in terms of diversity. So for a lot of women my age, we're looking around and we're wondering, what happened? Why so slow? What is going on? And as a psychologist, I realized it wasn't rational. Everyone openly espouses the importance of diversity and gender equity, and yet it's so slow to occur. So because of my psychology background, I realized it had to be something to do with the unconscious. And this is happening, the stalling, despite diversity training and new programs. So there had to be something. And this, the neuropsychologist in me, was really pleased to start reading about blind spots in terms of how it works, because I think it explains a lot. Most of our mental processing is unconscious. And that surprised me, which, you know, for a neuropsychologist, you know, maybe it shouldn't have. But some experts are saying that only 1 to 2% of our processing, 1 to 20% of our processing is conscious. So that's a slow, conscious, rational type processing that we do all the time as lawyers, right? Or as we do as professionals. We only are able to chunk and analyze 16 to 50 bits of info per second. That's very slow. And if we had to do more using this slow processing, we would crash, just like a computer. We'd become paralyzed. We can't do it. So let's look at fast processing. 11 million bits of information compared to 16 to 50. And if there's an association, fast processing will find it. 80 to 99%, there was a Nobel Prize winner that suggested that 99% of our processing is unconscious. So that is amazing. And it impacts perception, action, and judgment. It's how we frame our view of the world. And as I said, if there's an association, it will find it. And with gender, it's not so hard to find, is it? To see the differences. And what I find really fascinating about this, and it's in my book, is that until the late 1800s, the color was white for children up to the age of 6. And the first color for boys was pink, because of red. Red was considered stronger. So again, this has been fairly recent in terms it was the early 1900s where the blue and pink was actually designated for boys and girls, pink for girls and blue for boys. I read with interest an article in Wired magazine in August. It turns out image recognition software is like fast processing, and I think it's very easy to understand then, looking at this information, to understand what fast processing does and how it creates blind spots. So it's very similar to recognition software. IRS is programmed to search for associations. So the software, image recognition, is programmed to search for associations, and they take these thousands and thousands of research images and they have the software go through it and come up with image recognition based on those images. And what they found was, and the programmers were shocked, is that their program became gender biased. And in one instance, they had a male in the kitchen that was labeled a woman. So that blew me away. And then they took it, which was rather funny, they took it to the extreme and said, so what happens if you've got software that is doing these incorrect image recognitions? So they talked about the example of a robot in the future that is in the kitchen and isn't sure why a man is in the kitchen. So based on this type of programming, it would offer the male a beer, and the female in the kitchen, who the robot didn't know why she was there, it would offer to help her with chores, with kitchen chores. So you can see how this bias starts. The programmers were so shocked that they realized they had to correct the programming. So they went in and corrected the programming based on these research images. That's how it happens, because of these associations, and they are unconscious. So we all have gender programming in childhood. We all do. And it's relentless and it's rigorous. So it's not only images that we see, it's also messages. And in the book, I talk about how early this occurs. So by age 2, children actually are able to tell you which gender is associated with objects such as brooms or briefcases. So it's learned very, very quickly. And we all operate blindly using gender norms and values, all of us. That's why I say no shaming or blaming men, because we all have it, we've all learned it. And it informs our decisions, actions, assessments, and approaches. And if you're interested to find out what your bias is, the extent of your bias, and everyone is biased, if you have a brain, you're biased, go to the IAT, it's out of Harvard, just Google it, and it will give you a measurement on race, age, and gender based on your performance, on your quick association of different pictures. So really important to be aware of that. So why this book? To provide this information to more women. So my clients have greatly benefited. I see how that works for them. And it's really important to get this information out so you can control and chart your careers, to know the rules. So when you're, even if you were raised with brothers and your mother was very masculine and you have a lot of masculine traits, because you live in society and you had peers, chances are you have been impacted. And so women tend to grow up, because they're raised as girls, just knowing the feminine gender rules. We don't know the masculine gender rules. And that's really what governs masculine workplaces. So it's difficult for us. I've said this to a lot of people when I talk to males about it. They understand these rules at work, but where they're really at sea is at home and in personal lives, in their personal lives. And there's a lot now being written on masculinity in the future. And it's important to recognize that these restrictive gender rules help nobody. To be restricted in terms of your traits and abilities and only be able to express certain traits, it doesn't help women and it doesn't help men. But I'm focusing on women because we're talking about the workplace, so that's why it becomes important. So important to know the rules, important to become fluid and versatile in the use of masculine and feminine approaches, to know what you bring to the table, what your preferences are, and to know best practices. So surprisingly, for some women, when they find out, feminine approaches are actually best practices in negotiation and leadership, despite what is thought of in terms of the general population as being best practices being masculine. So it's really important to recognize gender blind spots and to deal with them in real time. And how it's helped my clients is for them to know the feminine approaches that are best practices, when to use them, as I mentioned, to recognize gender bias in real time. I am blown away by young women who tell me how they're able to recognize what is going on, gendered expectations, and to deal with it in the moment. And that is quite exceptional. And that's what this is about. Recognizing gender blind spots, recognizing it for what it is, and being able to deal with it. Also to harness gender values and habits to accelerate skill use. And then to mitigate beliefs that interfere with skill development. That's one of the gender blind spots, which is limiting mindsets. And I give client examples throughout the book to help you with understanding it. So, who is the author, or who is the audience for this book? We know who the author is, it's me. The audience for this book. So for women who want to take control, who want to gain awareness about the gender dynamics that are going on at work, for those who mentor and champion women, so both men and women in that case, for those who want to own and solve the issue of inequity, recent data is showing that we have to get men involved to own the problem and to problem solve it. And for leaders who want to lead inclusively, for inclusive leadership, and for organizations who want women to shine. So here are my asks. Women Don't Ask, that was a book from 2003. Here are my asks. Please read my blogs. I blog extensively, usually around 2 a week. So if you're interested, please go and look at them. Join me on LinkedIn and I'll give you notice about my book release date. It's just on the cusp of being released. And please buy my book and tell your friends if you enjoy it. Tell your friends about it. Also, half the proceeds are going to Because I Am a Girl. We have to stop the practice of child brides. And in your buying the book, you are also supporting Because I Am a Girl. And that's it. Thank you.